their comfort zone. If a transformation is delivered by somebody in finance, they're going to focus on cutting buckets of cost and their perception of waste. There are people that really do have money, and they're often quite invisible. The families here in UAE, Middle East generally, they run operating companies. You have a pain in your back, but what causes it? It's not caused by your back, it's caused somewhere else.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have an iconic date, February 20, 2025. And the world is a very different place than it used to be even 1 month ago. We see politicians meeting in a very, very complex and speed pace all over the world. And the same goes for the companies. The environment is changing and the companies must react. My name is Boslav Lipovsky. I'm the founder of the CE Interim Management Group. We support companies during turnarounds, transformations, and market entries in Europe, USA, Mexico, and the Middle East. And I'm happy to have a very honored guest today with me, Mr. Nick Ayton, who's a seasoned veteran, interim manager, executive expert in transformations and turnaround. Nick, welcome to my show. Please introduce yourself. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Boslav. It's great to be here, actually, and the sun is shining. So, I come from the UK a few days ago, and of course it's winter there and it's cold. So it's nice to be. And the thing about here is, as soon as you land, you feel the energy, don't you? Walking around, there's lots going on. There's a buzz. The environment's always changing. We look out the window here, and it's just. Yeah, it's all going on. Construction, you can feel the vibe in the city. You can feel things, really, really happening. You're right. Your introduction is interesting because we are in a fast-changing environment, geopolitically, economically. You've got different regions and different parts of the world coming online in a sense. You've got China. You've got India, you've got some of the biggest economies now sort of catching up the mother of economies, which is obviously the US. And we have regime changes, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. But behind the scenes, of course, is you have the reality of economics, which are shifting massively. Capital markets are shifting. The cost of capital is shifting. Consumer tastes are shifting. And we almost have the sort of meeting of two worlds. We've got the Trump effect.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to somebody at BlackRock not long ago that said that when Trump goes on Twitter, he can move a market 10% with some of the stuff that he says. And you think about that, and you think, wow, okay. So look, I'm a technologist. I did computer science in the 1970s, mainframes, really, I guess. And I would argue that the world still runs on mainframes, although a lot of younger people would say, Nick, what are you saying? But no, all the big critical systems, government, military, banking, are still sort of mainframe based. So I've been in tech for, goodness knows, over 40 years. So I've seen all of the technologies come and go. In the 80s, I had loads of startups, all technology based. And I like to build things. So one of my first forays into technology was I designed and built an in-flight cabin management system for commercial airlines. So that managed all the in-flight cabin activities, and we sort of went into entertainment. And of course, 101 was quite interesting. Sort of, the MBA classes that don't teach you was 88, 89. Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait, and the airline market stopped, and so did we. So having had a lot of startups building stuff, there are things that hit you, which we can talk about, we can unpick maybe later. But I spent 25 years in global IT services as well, which is essentially a form of M&A. So you outsource a function, a business function, such as IT, but what you're using is your company's balance sheet and cost of capital is cheaper than the customer, the target customer. So that in those days, it was outsourcing, and it was the labor arbitrage which delivered the transformation, which was really the variable cost element, not the fixed cost element. There was a little bit of fixed cost benefit. And so I spent a long time in that working for, for CSC and Capgemini and Siemens, some big brands. And then later on, I ended up doing business transformation stuff for some of those brands. So I was lucky that in the late 1990s, I worked alongside James Champy and Gary Hamill, and Gary wrote the book "Leading the Revolution," which in '94 was a seminal book on how large organizations transformed. And with Jim, he coined the phrase "business process reengineering," and the two of them created that methodology, that framework for delivering transformation for large organizations. So I was fortunate enough to go along for the ride, really, and learn some of the basics, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then sort of 2012, I got into Bitcoin a little bit, early days of Bitcoin, which was a wild ride, I have to say. 2015, got involved in building a Bitcoin derivatives trading exchange. Very early doors again, trying to sort of get that regulated. And then my life changed again, where I got involved in a fintech platform for wealth management and savings in the UK on the back of some legislation. So I built a fintech platform which scaled very, very quickly. Again, it's a business model thing, which you can talk about. And and then I do a lot of public speaking. I'm known as a technologist, so I have views on all kinds of different technology, and I try and keep ahead of, on the cutting edge of technology, whether it's longevity or life sciences or material science, quantum computing, AI, all these kinds of things, and they all have a role to play at some point. And and then I got involved in family offices, and that was my foray into the region here 15 years ago, where the family said, "Nick, we want to get involved in blockchain or Web3 or quantum. How do we do it? You have the technology understanding. We have the need, we have the desire, we want to get involved," but they didn't know how to do it. So that brought me here. So I've been here for 15 years, and what's not to like? I mean, it is just the most vibrant environment and the land of opportunity.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for the introduction. One thing that I could add, probably, you are a very, very world citizen, cross-culturally aware. You're from UK, you live here in Dubai, you've been also active in Poland and all around the world. So happy to have you here.
I think that's a key point, actually. The I've worked for American companies, French companies, German companies. I've done deals on 5 continents. I see, as a proud Brit in a sense, I see myself as a European. The little island off the coast of France has always been part of Europe, although other people might have a different view. But ultimately, yeah, cultural sensitivity in doing things at a transformational level is massively important. And if we talk about the culture here, it has specific protocols and rules. And if you want to affect change in any environment, you have to be conscious and aware of those rules and protocols. And you have to ingratiate yourself. You have to earn some trust and some respect. And those two things here are massive, because it's a family hierarchy here. You got to remember the environment here is, dare I say, is a little bit tribal. So you have a hierarchy of families, and they have a vision, 2030, 2050 vision. They lay out the vision, and everyone gets behind it. So the protocol in terms of behavior is often set by the vision, in a sense. So yeah, it's massively important, and I'm pleased you raised it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You mentioned the vision. Yes, it's 2030 vision, even 2050, and they are all aligned and go into one direction. Where does interim management come into place?
Well, that's a very good question, of course. If you if you if you think about how they allocate and deploy capital here, they have enormous amounts of capital. One of the things that they often struggle with, certainly the families, and in the early days, the sovereign funds, they didn't have a great deal of depth of knowledge. So I know some of the families I've spoken to got involved in doing deals and they lost their shirt. They made a poor investment. They didn't understand the tech, and it went bad for them. So if you think about 4 or 5 years on, as the vision has said, we want to be the leader in healthcare, we want to be the leader in AI, we want to get into quantum, and what tends to happen is the capital flows that get behind that vision, they want to do it quickly, they want to move at pace. And you and I both know that if you make certain decisions and do things quickly, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get involved in things that maybe you shouldn't have done, or in actual fact, you probably should have done, but you should have had a different strategy and taken more time to come to terms with that investment, that deal. So where we are with the landscape here is you have a lot of the sovereign funds, a lot of the families have deployed enormous amounts of capital into investments. And some of those investments are underperforming,
Okay.
and underperforming by quite a factor. And what are you going to do? The knee jerk reaction is, you strip out costs and, you try and save the company. The more strategic direction is you look at your management team and say, do they have the right skills to turn this around? And we can unpack that.
Yeah.
And but I also think the role for interims is significant. It's going to be even bigger, arguably, than most people might think, and that's because you and I both know the problems are never the problems. The underperforming organisations, we know why they're underperforming, but quite often the management teams and the investment or the private equity firm, when the funds account for the performance of their portfolio, it's going to be quite clear that there's going to be a significant element that are off track, underperforming. Maybe the sales revenue is slowing down. Maybe the earnings quality is not as good as they envisaged. Maybe the market isn't quite there, or as you and I both know, it's timing is quite often a factor. You put money into a company, but is the timing right? And I go back to my early statement where I think the sovereign funds and the families were so excited to follow the vision and demonstrate to deploy capital, they did it quickly. And I think now there's a leveling up process of making sure that they get the best returns out of those investments. So I think interim is the beginning here. I think it's going to be big here.
Yes, I can confirm. No, when we moved here last year, we did the market research. You have the traditional executive search, headhunters and recruiters, but it takes them ages to find a profile. Not talking about the mindset of the permanent
Yeah.
employees, it's different. Then you have the consultants here, the global players, but the interim management market is very, very embryonic stage. And that's exactly why we moved in, because 10 years ago, when I remember when we started the company in Eastern Europe, it was very similar situation.
Mm.
What are you talking about in Eastern Europe? Interim management.
Yeah.
No one knew what it is. So we started to educate the market, etc. So yes, the market here is in a very, very embryonic stage, and we are happy to pioneer the market and support the companies, either local companies or international companies.
I think the timing's perfect, don't you? I mean, but as I said earlier, the problem is often not the problem. So therefore the solution is often not the solution. So to reach for consulting to try and solve a problem in an organization, you and I both say is that it's probably the wrong solution for the wrong problem. Whereas the reason I got into interim was like a lot of things. It was by mistake, really. Somebody said to me, "Well, you've got experience in this area. You know what to do. You've run global sales organizations. You've outperformed, and can you come and fix this?" And I remember when I did an assignment at Getronics, which was a 3 billion Dutch IT services company, and they just acquired another company called Pink Ricardo, quite a strange name actually. And the CEO at the time said, we want to do post-merger integration of the two sales teams. And that's very simplistic because you can't just do that. You have to look at products, you have to look at operations, you have to look at customer services, and those things ramp through the organization. So that was the brief. But of course, I think when we said when we spoke last week, the reality was is the CEO wanted to trigger his parachute to leave the company. So the business metrics weren't sales to trigger those. The metrics were earnings quality and EBIT. So therefore, the emphasis of the assignment changed because I had to deliver for my sponsor. So again, by default, I got drawn into global IT services sort of turnarounds because I understand it, having sold them and delivered and worked in operations and all the different aspects of the complexity of delivering an outsourcing contract over 5 to 10 years. I guess intrinsically, you start to understand the operating levers, and there are the obvious ones and the subtle ones of all organizations. They all have a set of operating levers. So yeah, I got into interim by mistake in a sense, but I get an enormous thrill because maybe we can sort of edit this out later. But for me, I don't get drawn into the politics.
Yes.
I'm there to do a job. I'm there to deliver something, and it's very satisfying having worked in a large organization and been on the payroll. Politics gets in the way, as we all know.
At least 80% of the
Yeah.
time.
I mean, you know what? And the interim assignment, yeah, you get caught into it, but you can avoid it. You're there to do a job, and you have to deliver for your sponsor, which is typically the board or the CEO or the chairman, and they have a specific thing in mind that they want to achieve. So yeah, that's what makes it fun. And then I can go to meetings and listen to all the politics, and I just listen. I don't have to get involved. I just absorb and listen.
There's a very huge difference for the companies, and we keep explaining it. That's the pioneering mindset of interim management. If you hire someone in between jobs, a permanent employee, he will focus on the politics, on surviving the trial period, finding his place, building his network, securing his bonus, looking already at his promotion
Mm,
in a year's time.
yes.
Whereas if you engage an interim manager, he hits the ground running from day one, delivers, and then leaves in 6, 12, 18 months, depending on the project duration, and
Yeah.
absolutely doesn't build politics, intrigues, etc. He stays outside of the organization, although operationally
Yes.
active, but completely independent.
Yes. Yeah. And the other aspect of that is what I would say is how much pain does the organization is it prepared to go through? And quite often you need an outsider to deliver,
Yeah.
in quotes, the pain, the transformation, the change, which somebody inside on the payroll, may be worried about HR and other corporate functions. They find it much more difficult to make some of those hard decisions.
And especially large organizations, they have high quality senior people, no doubt, but they keep repeating what they already achieved,
Agreed.
successful and not successful. So they just repeat, whereas an external interim manager brings a completely different view and starts a disruption in any area or a function if necessary.
Yeah, look, we can think about the typical approach to transformation, which is often bottom up cost reduction, because as you
Very
indicate,
good.
it's a comfort zone. If a transformation is delivered by somebody in finance, they're going to focus on cutting buckets of cost and their perception of waste, which is we can talk about, which is, in my view, is arbitrary cost reduction is harmful to the business.
Yep.
But if you have somebody in operations running the transformation, they're inclined to look at maybe outsourcing because they can get it off their plate. Sometimes they will say, well, I want to keep my empire, so I'm not going to outsource. I just want to get my arms around everything, keep everything because I'm
Mm.
empire building.
Yeah.
Um, CEOs typically don't get involved in transformation. My view is they should. Okay. And that's a clue to how I go about it. But I think you're right. If the approach to transformation is classical, and quite often they'll bring in one of the big consulting firms who spend half the time trying to identify what the problem is, trying to write the paper on this is the problem, and then this is the solution. Whereas you and I both know you've got to implement day one. It's again, dare I say, the Trump, you know, he made some promises, he got voted in, and day one he hit the ground running. And I think that reflects that you and I both know where the bad smells are likely to be. You go through the doors, you know where to look. You've had a look at some of the numbers. You speak to some of the C-suite. You make an initial assessment, and literally within hours,
Yes.
I can tell you exactly some of the issues. But it's like back pain. You have a pain in your back, but what causes it?
It's very,
The
very
answer is it's not caused by your back. It's caused somewhere else. So to tease out some of the to define what is the problem and the things that need to be fixed, quite often you need to tease out, and it manifests in very strange areas where, the cause of pain is often not what you think it is.
I say the first step in every successful crisis management or turnaround mission is acknowledging that you have a problem. 90% of the clients, they don't think they have a problem. They just want something small, partial solution
Mm.
to solve the big issue that they have. So it's very different. And we see it even now. We touched a little bit the differences, cultural differences between Europe and here Middle East. I mean, we're talking here about 4 to 6% GDP growth. In Europe, it's less.
It's flat at the moment. Let's be honest.
It's flat.
Yeah.
I liked it that 1 month after the year end, they already put a revision of the growth,
Yeah.
especially in Germany. But what we see even in the projects, the companies tend to cure the problem, solve the problem the same way. They cut cost, they do a hiring freeze, they do a marketing freeze, they contract their operations. I mean, I spoke to a CEO of a facility management business here in Dubai. It was a German group. And the decision of the German group was we close down Dubai and concentrate on Germany. And I was like, what?
Are you crazy?
Are you crazy? We're in crisis. The market is flat. We need to cut costs. So we cut costs in Dubai. But you got 100,000 apartments built here and all the infrastructure and offices. This is a growth market. So my question to you is, what was your recommendation? Do a bottom-up cost-cutting transformation or rather market repositioning, sales-driven transformation?
Look, you know my answer. Let's just touch on why bottom up cost reduction is a problem. And it's very simple. The most organizations who are going to cut costs have a very arbitrary approach to cutting costs. They'll go for the easy buckets of perceived cost,
Mhm.
marketing, customer service, call centers, and it is very arbitrary. The other thing that is often not spoken about is the impact on morale. A bottom up is morale killing. It kills the energy of the business. People start updating their CVs. They think Armageddon's coming. And if you start shutting down offices like UAE, then that's a warning sign.
Yep.
And the other focus is that this persistent vanity around revenue. We must keep our revenue ticking without a thought on the quality of the revenue, because not all revenue is equal. There are certain revenue where the quality is much higher than other revenue. And there's the clue, because the world that I, grew up in, which was business process reengineering,
Mhm, mhm.
Gary Hamel's view, and then I also was a big fan of a guy called Richard Koch, and he wrote a book called Simplify. And it's the 80-20 rule on operations, capital, on everything, is that 80% of your profit will come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your product sales will come from 20% of your products. They'll be favorite ones. And also the quality of EBIT is the same. So therefore, that's the big clue, isn't it? You focus on the quality of your earnings, and it's the EBIT and earnings that drive share price, that drive shareholder value. So before going into the next bit of this, think about what a company is, what is an organization. And I peel it back into this. Uh, the the objective and function of an organization is to create demand, fulfill that demand, and implement whatever you've sold, and then collect the cash into the company. And in very simple terms, that's the cash conversion cycle. Order to cash, purchase to pay, they're back office functions. What we're talking about is an organization's ability to identify and create demand for their products and services, and then qualify and close those opportunities, then implement, install whatever you need to do to deliver that products and service,
Optimize.
and then collect the cash.
Yeah.
Right. So cash conversion is the essence of an organization. So that's really laying out the fundamentals of top down.
Talking about cash, we see cost cutting and very, very careful cash management in Europe, whereas here we see family offices, private equities really throwing millions and billions in several sectors. What's the difference, or what's the unique position? Why are family offices here in Dubai and Middle East so important?
That's a great question. And the function of a family office is interesting, isn't it? Because if you compare US or UK or German or mostly European families, the families have made their money in a particular sector or industry. And what tends to happen is they withdraw from operational activity. They might hold a board seat still, but they then deploy their capital into fund of funds, VCs, private equity, or they'll have a captive private equity firm. And that's the vehicle. Whereas the families here in the UAE, Middle East generally, they run operating companies.
Okay.
They still run the holding groups and the multinational conglomerates. And there's lots of examples of families here. And the other attribute of the families here is that they're very industry specific. So there is a hierarchy of families, but you have families that run infrastructure or water and sewage processing or food distribution, supply chain, logistics. They run the hospitals. There's families involved in military and defense, families involved in energy production, families behind some of the big sovereign funds. So the difference here between public and private capital, I would say, is very close. You couldn't put a piece of paper between the two. It's one and the same in a sense. But the clue here is that the families will deploy capital in lots of different ways. They'll have their family conglomerates and holdings, so they'll acquire products and services. Then they'll want to deploy it within the family groups, the businesses. They will have their private family office. They may put some money in terms of asset allocation into VCs and fund of funds for a bit of diversification. And at the same time, a lot of the families are directly involved with the sovereign funds. So the family money, they're operational, they're running businesses, they have tens of thousands of employees. So when they buy your product and service, they also have a transformational view, thinking, how can I implement that across our family group for performance improvement? And so it's really key to understand the structure of the families here, and they are different to the family offices in other parts of the world.
Yes, very, very different. Like you mentioned already, it's hierarchical. The decision making is very, very, very different. You mentioned sectors. They diversify or specify in certain sectors or
Yeah.
industries. When we decided to enter Dubai market, everyone told me like recommendation, don't think that much. Just move over and you will see so many opportunities out there. If you just look outside, it's logistics, it's fintech, it's healthcare, it's real estate, it's construction, it's warehousing. I mean, the Al Maktoum airport, wherever you look, so many opportunities.
Yes.
Where do you think are the top 3, 5 sectors or areas that interim management should focus, or the business community should focus?
Well, that's a let's unpick that question because there's a lot in there. Okay, so the first thing is that the region has the vision. Then it has a number of policies. So it has a very specific energy policy. It also, from a leadership point of view, it has its priorities. So there are various priorities around food self-sufficiency, food security. It's a big deal here because it's a desert country, right? And that is very akin to water security. Again, desert. It's, they've relied on the deep wells and the water from under the ground and desalinization, which is quite expensive and what have you. Obviously, military securing your sovereign boundaries and things. But I think that's once you understand that and look into that, then you understand some of the other subtle areas where healthcare, the health of the nation, is a massive priority here. The Arab way of life in the past is, because of their beliefs, they shy away from alcohol, but they love their sugar. It's a very convenient society here. So they sit in their car, you can get everything delivered to the doorstep. The young crown prince is trying to get the country moving, get it healthier. So all of a sudden there's been a real shift of emphasis on the health of the nation, which is significant. And that manifests and drip feeds down into, preventative behaviors, sports and exercise. And then it goes into specific therapeutics and stem cell behaviors, because the Arab genomics is very specific to the region, because they came up evolutionary in a hot climate.
Yep.
So their bodies are different to the Europeans or someone in a cold climate. So healthcare is massive here. And as a technologist, the breakthroughs in technology are now significant. The Jennifer Doudna and the CRISPR breakthrough in terms of the understanding the genome and the DNA, they're building on that. So they're looking at cures, they're looking at prevention, they're looking at nudging lifestyle choices to so healthcare is a big one. And that splits off into wellness, looking after yourself, living better, and longevity, living longer. They're not they need to be considered together, because being old and being decrepit, and you need to be out.
Not that much fun.
It's not much fun. Yeah. So I think definitely. And then, of course, that flips into the world of sort of technology and AI and data processing, because it's healthcare and life sciences is very data, heavy. And the AI evolution and revolution, in a sense, is something that they've fed off, because the rest of the world has been slow. You can argue the race between China and America, who's winning that. I've often thought that China has less boundaries, less bureaucracy, less red tape, and they're caught up, if not overtaking. But the rest of the world has been slow to respond in terms of building out their infrastructure to support a world of AI, which is then closely akin to robotics, of course. So they're happy bedfellows. So I think, core infrastructure from an AI data center in healthcare, they go well together. The other key areas, of course, is the explosion in material science and exotic materials. The level of construction here is just astronomical. And with the new South Dubai, the 150 square kilometers on the edge of Expo and near the Maktoum airport, it's their plans to build an enormous city there. And part of that is also to accommodate the growth in tourism. They have a number of sources of income here. They obviously have an enormous expat community. They've set themselves up as a center of commerce here. You have a logistics hub. You have a travel and airline hub. This is the center of the world because it bridges east and west. But the plan is to get to 44 million tourists, I believe, by 2029. So they've got to upgrade their infrastructure. They've got to build more hotels, more golf courses, more infrastructure. So the whole construction and real estate is a sector to exploit, really. And again, will we see another sort of real estate correction as we did maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago? I just think that this place is on the map now and everyone wants to come here.
Yeah.
So that's going to run. So I will get back to sort of where there was healthcare, AI data centers. So we're talking about construction. That is very akin to logistics and supply chain, because there aren't enough building materials. So, as I indicated earlier, the explosion in material science, there are new types of materials on which to construct buildings. Materials that come with, such as graphene cement, for example, has more tensile strength than steel. It's lighter, but it has thermodynamic properties
Mhm.
that can deal with the sunshine here. And it's lighter to transport. It's basically
Cheap.
computational chemistry where you can create solutions around the mix of chemicals. So that's going to be big here. Construction and development, and all the services that go with buildings. I came across a company the other day that does is a drone company that does tethered drones. So you don't need FIA or clearance because they're tethered to the building. So instead of having people dangling off the building cleaning it, you have these drones clean, but they don't use water because it protects the water supply here. So those kinds of industries are. So let's talk about some others. Sport is taking off here in a big way. We obviously have the Grand Prix, and I'm talking about the UAE and KSA and Qatar, whatever. They're all embracing sport.
The Dubai run recently.
Absolutely. You then have gaming, entertainment and gaming. It's going to take off. Abu Dhabi is going to build a sphere. No doubt Dubai will have a sphere. Riyadh will have a sphere similar to Las Vegas. That's massive computational sort of challenges. Let's put it that way. So I think, we'll break it down. Healthcare, AI and data centers, logistics and supply chain. Anything agri-tech is big. Anything to do with food supply chain is significant. And then we have energy. So one of the things you think about here is that, yes, it's an oil giant, but they have a mixed strategy. You've got the Maktoum solar city thing coming online very soon. They've been a little bit late to the party in a sense. And then they're going to commit to mini nukes, gas, coal, a mixed energy supply. So one of their challenges is actually how to bring that onto the grid, how to store it in short term, and how to deploy that mixed energy, both alternate and traditional, into the infrastructure. So the energy sector is going to go through a massive revolution here, if it's not already. And then I think the other things is going to be things like transportation. You sit on Sheikh Zayed Road. I mean, you must have sat in your car for hours. Getting here was a challenge, right? So yeah, I think from an interim point of view, there are a lot of established industries here, a lot of established companies that are probably challenged. I would say, probably challenged on how to deal with the growth and opportunity, which we spoke about briefly. Maybe it's about organizing themselves better to get their arms around the opportunity. How do I get my businesses to scale faster? How do I create more demand, close that demand at scale? And that takes a bit of tweaking as well. It's not just a case of, well, we're struggling with sales. How do I get rid of cost? The other flip side, which you touched on, which was enormous growth and opportunity. How do I prepare the organization and take it forward to take advantage of that? So I think interim is going to be multifaceted. And I think anywhere you look, any sector, I think there's going to be a need.
There's one point we have not touched yet.
Yeah.
You have more than 100 nationalities living here.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a multicultural pot here. What would be your recommendation for companies entering here, Middle East market, let's say Dubai? Should they go with a home-based manager, like if a German company or a UK-based company want to enter the market in Dubai? Should they send an interim manager from UK to Dubai? Should they hire a UK interim manager like you that is based in Dubai already for 15 years and understand it? Or should they go with a local interim manager?
Again, that's another great question.
We could do a completely different podcast on this.
Indeed. And indeed, so let's sort of remind everyone here that the opportunity to set up here has never been easier. You have the free zones where 10, 15 years ago, you had to find a local partner to get established here. Now you open up in a free zone and you control 100% of your IP in your company. The other thing that's changed is the rules and regulations. Getting a visa, getting banking. Office space can be tricky, by the way. But getting access to the things you need to set up and work here and get on the ground. And this is a key factor, because if you want to do business here, the families, the companies expect you to commit to the region. And their view of commitment is to have some sort of presence here, a legal presence, probably a sales office maybe to start with. And and if you don't have that, their view is, well, you're not here then.
Yep.
Yeah. So they want that level of commitment. The second thing is, you need a regional plan. You need a local strategy using their local language to support why you're coming here and what you're going to do on the ground here, why the products and services that you're offering is important. So I would say that more than any time before you start hiring people, you need to get set up here, test the marketplace and size the marketplace, get the local narrative sorted, which is the conversation we've had about your arrival here. Get the narrative, build the brand, build the story, and then start identifying the possible partners for distribution, for scaling. The other piece here is intellectual property and licensing. The region is very keen on creating multi-generational wealth. So not just deploying capital and expecting an exit or return, but what they also want is that the longevity of that ownership of intellectual property, shared intellectual property, or a regional exclusive. But I was at 100%, Boslav, is that you want to test the market here, and finding people such as myself and others that we both know to do that initial legwork, to test the market, to get things established, maybe to get some initial orders going, to get those distribution conversations, to get things moving on the ground before, and also maybe help backfill and build a team. Let's not forget that. That's a service that's easy to do. But I would say that the region is exciting. It has certain nuances. It has a certain behavior. And if you come in here cold, you put your German manager on the ground and he's not used to the environment here, you will get results, but they'll be slow.
Slow, yeah.
It would be much slower. And that's why we are both fans of Interim, because it's speed. You hit the ground fast. We know the people to talk to. And that's the key. Navigating this region of the families and the sheikhs and people that say they have money. There are people that really do have money, and they're often quite invisible. They're often quite obvious. And there's lots of intermediaries and brokers here, and there's lots of middlemen that will try and get involved, and you need to cut through all of that. So the way in which, getting on the ground here, setting up here, getting an interim business development person or an interim country manager, get them to get the narrative, build the brand, get the relationships, build the pipeline, win some initial deals, get some capital flowing before you really, really do commit to the region. So I think it's an excellent point you make.
Yeah. What we always used to say, get the people who are already there, who understands the hierarchy, the mentality, the structure, the setup, the decision making, and everything.
Yes.
And that's exactly interim management. That's people like you, international people with global experience, but with a local presence.
It's network here. And it's a very clicky market here, and it is about network, and that's what we talked about earlier. The families break down into certain industry and sectors. So there are maybe 5 or 6 key families in construction and development here. Once you know that, then you can navigate that. There are several sovereign funds involved in construction development, but then there'll be different families involved in healthcare or automotive. So just knowing that, if you come in here cold, that will take you years,
Several years, yeah.
to get to know that. So the value in hiring people that know how to navigate the region will save you a lot of money.
So in a summary,
Yeah.
what would be your key recommendation for companies trying to enter this market?
I think I think the attraction of the 6% GDP growth target and the region here is growing. Infrastructures needs to catch up. So in a sense, that growth projection is going to carry on for several years. So therefore, you need to understand where you fit and how you fit in the market. I'm not advocating a piece of consulting work because you should know why you want to come here, right? And that's typically, as we say, is access to opportunity. Access to a region that's consuming a lot and will continue, and they are the biggest allocators of capital in all of the areas we talked about. But if you come here, you have to have some idea of a plan in your mind. So you sell a product. It could be a supercapacitor for the energy market. It could be a solar product. It could be a military product for defense. It could be a data center storage device or high performance computing. You need to have an idea what you want to do here. Do you want to sell direct, or do you want to sell through distribution? Are you looking for an in-country partner where you can piggyback on the back of their distribution? There are easier ways and hard ways to do this. Selling is about your return and your sales effort. So if you've got a very small team on the ground, well, then channel and distribution might be your best bet.
Yep.
Because you get somebody who's already got the route to market. So one of the families that we talk to quite a lot has got access to 25,000 retail outlets. Well, if you know that, that's quite handy. So if you've got a consumer-facing product, you go and test it with that family. The families that own the supermarket chains, and they have all the logistics. There's another family that runs pharmaceutical distribution business. So all your pills and all your vitamins, what have you, goes through this distribution. And maybe there's one major family and maybe a couple of others that do that. The oil processing, energy production. So once you navigate and stuff, so what I would suggest is companies want to come here. We have a conversation with them. You decide you want to be here. Let's get you committed here. And then let's target where your products and service best fits. Let's get some focus. If you are like the drone company, real estate. So you have two types of real estate. You have the people who've already got the skyscrapers that need maintaining. That's one area. And then you've got the new developers. There's another area. So let's have a very simple strategy: is where is the best return for your effort, your dollars spent, and where can we get the quickest traction? Do you want to do direct sales or do you want to do indirect sales? There are key decisions that you want to make, or let's test both and see what the biggest return is for that effort.
Nick, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you, Roslav, for the opportunity. And look, one thing's for sure, over the next few years, we're going to have a lot of fun here.
Definitely. I can already see it. Yeah.